Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this clip, but before you do, please hit subscribe. I want to talk in detail about what you're doing today at OSV, and you just touched on it. But I think before we talk about that, it would be important to set the stage at the earlier part of your career, which was in quant investing. And you just mentioned things like having an open point of view and being able to challenge the status quo. And I am a real estate person. I am not a quant. But when I think of open point of view, that to me, I go, well, if you're quant investing, you have an algorithm and this is what the algorithm says, and that's the point of view. So let's just kind of start with, again, going back to how you were raised. And you said your grandfather didn't like Wall Street, but you made a career on it. How did you get into quant investing? And what is quant investing? You create an algorithm and then put it out into the world, and then it just trades stocks all day and you sit back and watch? How does it work? Because this is going to set the tone for what you're doing today, which I think is fascinating as well.
Thanks, Chris. So take a step back. Why did I get interested in this? It was the most interesting puzzle that I saw at an early age. I mentioned that my grandfather gave the majority of his money away during his own lifetime, but there was some left. And that went into a foundation. And so every quarter, all my aunts and uncles showed up. And when I always wanted to be at the adult table. And when I finally earned that privilege, I was seated next to my favorite uncle, Uncle John, and he and my father were having this very heated discussion over IBM. And I was listening, and basically they were going back and forth, and it was all about the CEO or the products that IBM had. And I interjected, wouldn't it make more sense to kind of look at how much money they make and how much you have to pay for that? And and basically they said, shut up. But so that ignited my curiosity. I'm like, I think they got it all wrong. I think that what you really want to do is you want to look at the underlying characteristics. It's like, right, if you're going to a doctor, do you want him to just look at you and say, yeah, you look healthy, go ahead? No, you want him to take your blood work. You want him to take an x-ray. You want him or her to be able to have data that says, ooh, you're very healthy, or you need some help. So you need to look underneath, right? And so that gives birth to what defines a stock, right? What defines a stock are the factors that stock possesses. So some stocks have super high valuations. It means investors are big believers in the future of that stock and are willing to pay through the nose for it. Other stocks have super low, which means that investors have very low expectations. Generally, what happens is super high expectations get dashed, right? Nothing grows to perfection, right? And super low expectations, pretty easy to beat, right? Like if you have zero expectations for a stock, it's not going to earn any money for the next 4 years. And then it comes in and earns a dime. Like everyone reevaluates and they're like, woo, we got that one wrong. And so you build out these series of factors and you use them to short circuit human OS. I always joke that the 4 horsemen of the investment apocalypse are fear, greed, hope, and ignorance. And only ignorance is not an emotion. More portfolio value in public markets and private markets has been wiped out by fear, greed, and hope than any bear market. And so basically what I try to get people to understand when I'm talking about why would you be a quant, essentially you are arbitraging human nature. We talked earlier about, people sometimes have their beliefs about things wrong. One of the things that we really have a wrong belief about is our own abilities. All of us men are the worst here, by the way. If you give a man a quiz and you say, okay, so we're going to chunk things in 10% buckets, right? So the top bucket is you're in the upper 10% of this particular skill, all the way down to number 10, you're in the bottom 10%. And then you say to men in a survey, where are you in your athletic ability? Guess where men put themselves? In the top two buckets, and then the stragglers who are a little bit more modest put themselves in the third bucket. Well, this cannot be statistically true. Same with thriving, same with insight, same with intuition. We all believe that we are much better than we actually are. And so, by the way, that is good for survival. That is good for all those things. It's really bad for making investment choices.
Yep.
And so what happened to me was I built out all of these facts, and this is kind of the dark ages. When I was writing about it, the first book I wrote was called Invest Like the Best, that showed you how you could clone your favorite portfolio manager. The book I'm best known for, What Works on Wall Street, was essentially, hey, how do all these particular factors perform over huge spans of time, right? Because the other thing, we just have all of these kinks in our human OS. And one of them is we are hyperbolic discounters. What does that mean? It means that anything beyond 5 years, it doesn't matter. Like that is infinite. That's infinity. We don't think about that at all. And so what we don't understand is if we hyperbolically discount, what do? Our emotions get aligned with what's happening right now. Why do you see the majority of sales at bear market bottoms? Why do you see the majority of buys or a bubble at the top of that bubble? Because we just cannot, the siren song is so strong that our human OS just drives us to do it. I'm guilty of it. Like I wrote a piece in 1999, April of 1999, called The Internet Contrarian, in which I said, this is the biggest bubble that anyone alive today has seen. It's probably bigger than the 29 bubble in this particular sector. 85% of these companies are going to be carried out feet first. Even the companies that do survive, and I mentioned Amazon, are going to be 95% lower in price than they are today, right? So that's analytical Jim. That's quant Jim over here, because that's what the numbers were telling me. Well, human OS Jim, what did he do? He founded an internet company like 6 months later. So when you see this at work in your own life, right? It freaks you out a little bit. And so the ability of having a set of algorithms that buy and sell for you is really good, especially if you're a longer term investor like we were with O'Shaughnessy Asset Management. But does that mean that we set it and forget it? No, not at all. We had a huge research team that continually researches, are we missing factors? Is there information that we aren't aware of? One of the reasons why I became so interested in machine learning and artificial intelligence is I kind of viewed that as the next frontier of quantitative analysis, right? And so the models, while directionally remaining the same, right? Buy cheap stocks on the mend is one of the best strategies in the world. What does that mean? It means their valuations are super low. Their price has turned a corner, right? And that's momentum. And cheap stocks on the mend, man, that's a powerful strategy. How many people are going to use it? Virtually none, because it's a very volatile strategy. So again, hyperbolic discounting, that O'Shaughnessy, oh God, he's a genius. No, he's a blithering idiot. And it's all based on, what happened over the last 3 months or 3 years. And so that differential is huge. And it allows you, if you can do it, to arbitrage it. So kind of that's what Quant is trying to do. It's trying to continuously improve these security selection models. But the reason it works over long periods of time is it immunizes you from the emotional decision making that makes all those sellers sell at the bottom of the market and makes all those buyers buy at the top of the market. By immunizing your emotional reactions, you get a sustainable edge. Now, does that happen all the time? No. There are strategies. We have some value strategies that underperformed for years. And again, what happens? People are people, right? You know, Jim, I really believed all of your data. It looks really good, but now you're wrong. And I'm pissed at you because you convinced me that you had this great strategy, and now I'm losing money, and you get fired. So, like, it's not just quants; it's all asset managers, right? It's a sine wave, right? You go from hero, goat, hero, goat, hero, goat, and that's because your time frame, your time horizon is wrong.
And probably because you can, at any second in the stock market, you can choose a result, where in private markets, you don't fully know.
Bingo. Bingo.
Was there a time, like when you were young, that you're like, I'm going to do quant? And then I'm trying to simplify the question as much as I can. When you built the first model, how did you know it was like, okay, the model's good to go? Like, this is the algorithm we're going with. What was the green light that you got? Was that a bunch of researchers came together, met in a room and said, this is as good as we can do? Like, how does a quant investor know they got their algorithm right, at least for that day?
Well, first off, it's not just for that day.
Yeah, or that strategy.
I mentioned earlier that our stuff is long-term oriented as opposed to super short. They're very different. So one is the algorithmic super fast traders, right, who are making decisions second by second, right? And they have to have their computers located really close to the stock exchange because they're looking for a very different edge than a quant like me, who's looking for an edge that is more sustainable. But how do you do it? You're an empiricist. You look at the data, right? People used to say, "Oh my God!" I wrote another piece in 2009 of March called "A Generational Buying Opportunity," and like everybody was saying, "Oh, in hindsight, you are such a genius." No, I'm not. I was just looking at the numbers, and you let the empirical data inform you, right? So, how do you make up your mind? Well, first off, you have to look over as many market cycles as you can, because some things are popular for like 5 years. And if you're just looking at 5 years, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, right? Because value investing became very popular right after the crash of the .com. And then everyone was like, oh, this works fabulously well. Well, it does over long periods of time, but worked particularly well over that short period of time. Back in the 60s and in the .com, the stocks with the highest valuations did the best for a persistent amount of time that changed a lot of minds, right? So you got to see as much data as you can over as many market cycles as you can, remembering as long as it's human beings pricing securities, the underlying names are going to be different, but what they're loving or hating is not going to be all that different, right? So get as much data as possible, stress test it as much as possible. What's the worst case scenario, right? Most people have no clue about what worst case scenarios are. We had a strategy at my first firm, O'Shaughnessy Capital. We still have the strategy. We renamed it at O'Shaughnessy Capital. It was called Cornerstone Growth, essentially that cheap stock on the men strategy that I mentioned earlier. And so it in my first version of my book proved to be like the best performing strategy. So when clients would come in, what strategy do you think they would want? That one. And so one of the things that I would do is say, okay, let me do this though. And then I would put up on the screen the 10 worst drawdowns that strategy had going all the way back to the 1950s. They were huge. And like, you knew instantly whether the client was going to be the right client for that particular strategy by their reaction. Like the ones who looked at it and their eyes got super wide and like, oh, there's no way I could handle that. We gave them much more conservative, right? But what does that mean? We're giving people information. We're giving them evidence. Like, again, back to doctors. Are you going to go to a doctor who's going to say, hey, Chris, this pharmaceutical rep just dropped these little yellow pills off, and I really like that guy. And so I'm going to give them to you and see if they work for you. You're going to run as far and as fast as you can away from that doctor. If, on the other hand, you go to a doctor, he gives you the full workup and he comes back to you and he says, Chris, generally you're in really great health. You do have this problem. I'm going to prescribe this medication. And the reason I'm prescribing that is because of all of this double-blind tests, evidence over a variety of different types of patients. You're going to want evidence, right? And so that's what quants want. We want evidence. We understand that we're probably going to be wrong much more. We understand that our emotions are going to get involved. It's like you're in real estate. Real estate is kind of the king of, that's my house, right? Or that's where my office is going to be because it's so cool and it's so, great location and all of that. It's all our emotional side, right? Yep. And so it's present everywhere, right? Like, why does advertising work? It works because it appeals not to our analytical mind. It appeals to our emotional mind, right? We want to fit in back to our evolutionary, but then we want to stand out. So, that's kind of a short version of why quantitative can be very effective. Final thought on it, though. Quant is not right for everybody. I always say to people that for the vast majority of investors, honestly, who are not interested, who aren't passionately curious about it, who don't understand what's kind of like the underlying evidence suggests, right? For those people, index your portfolio. Pick a world ETF that has the lowest management cost. You can get them for like 10 basis points, right? And then just dollar cost into your 401k or your IRA. You know what? You're done. You're done. You don't have to be on FinTwit. You don't have to like watch CNBC or read the Wall Street Journal every day and read all of the analyst reports. And you're going to be much happier. You're going to probably end up doing better than 90% because, again, persistent invest over time. But there are other investors who really do love all that stuff. And they think, yeah, not quant. Like, I have this unique insight. And you know what? Some people do. It's just hard identifying them ahead of time, right? And so what I always counsel people is find what's right for you. Find what's right for Chris. You're going to have a completely different outlook on your objectives, your goals, everything you might want than I do. And so when you can find something that resonates with you, that means that's probably something you're going to be able to stick with. And that's kind of the secret. The secret is persistent investment over time, right? Very hard to do. It just sounds so simple. Everyone's like, well, of course. Well, if you've got a dog, right? And you just were at the store and you saw that, his favorite dog food is right there. And so you bought a dozen cans, right? And then you're in that same store the next day and you see the same dog food half off. In real life, in the real world, you you'd stock up, right? You'd say, this is awesome. My Fido loves this. And I have the opportunity to buy much more at 50% lower in price. In the stock market, what do? You rush home, take the 12 that you bought at the higher price and bring them back to the store and say, I want a refund.
Oh my. Oh, that's so true. Why do we do that? Is that because, and you wrote this quote, because 45% of our investment choices in life are the genetics in which we're born? Is it something to do with how we're predisposed emotionally that we would, obviously the case you made for dog food is so obvious. Why in the stock market do we treat it differently? Is because we think about money differently, or is there some other emotion that's elicited that makes us do that?
I think that we think about dog food differently, right? So that's something we do know. We do know what our favorite pet really, what his or her favorite food is, right? So it's a real simple. It is not a multi-factor decision-making process, right? This is my pet's favorite dog food. It just went half off. Easy. I'm going to buy a lot of it because it's going to stay, it's canned and blah, blah, blah. In the market, very different. Multifaceted, multi-opinions, multi-people saying, pounding the table, like this stock is going to do great. And then there's the other guys over here, or gals over here saying this is a disaster. It's going to, go way, way down. And so as we're being bombarded by all of these various opinions and the market is collapsing, what's our basic instinct of all humans, not just humans, all animals? Fight or flee, right? And so flee is what operates at market bottoms. I'm going to flee. I am in danger, right? Because that gets back to the whole money angle. Listen, what is money? Money is an information technology. That's what it is. And people have such screwed up ideas about money. And because they tie it to themselves, they tie it to their self-worth, they tie it to, can I feed my family? Right. And those are especially, can I feed my family? That's actually a very important thing to think about. But if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, as you get love, as you get basic food, shelter, right, that's the bottom of the pyramid. And yet we carry our emotions with us up to the top of the pyramid. And most of us, at least in this country, thank God, and globally, by the way, the progress that's been made fighting things like hunger, fighting dysentery, fighting, people not having access to clean water. Like over the last 20 years, the improvements have been extraordinary, right? And yet we're always looking for novel dangers, right? That is part of our human programming. And so that gets bundled up in, we have this kind of incorrect attitude about money, about what that means, all of that. And then you have a short-term thing happening. The Dow went down 950 points today. Is it ever going to stop? Details at 11, right? We like doom. Again, back to human programming. We are programmed to seek out novel dangers. That's good programming, right? If we see a novel danger over there, we're going to fight or flee, right? So the problem is that switch is never turned off. And so we see things that are not actually novel dangers, like a bear market, right? And we see them, our nervous system and our brain sees them as a novel danger. Like whenever you hear always or never, right? You're in a really dangerous territory. Always and never, like if you can ban those from your thought process, you're going to be so much better off because Ben Stein, the guy in Ferris Bueller,
Yeah.
Bueller,
Yeah.
Bueller. His dad was a really renowned economist. And he said, unsustainable trends tend not to sustain themselves. So always like this stock is always going to go up. No, it's not, right? This stock is never going to recover. True, in some cases, companies do go bankrupt, right? But and here's another problem, right? That happens at the individual stock level all the time. Lots of companies do, in fact, go bankrupt, and they are never going to recover. But a big portfolio of stocks makes that de minimis occurrence because you've got diversity there.